Welcome, welcome. Welcome to San Miguel TV. Give y'all a minute to get settled in. This video will be titled Black Hebrew Israelites and Mormons Push Pseudo-Archeology. So let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Alright, well, first of all, let me kind of give a little introduction of what we're going to be going over this first video that I'm showing, actually. This is going to go into a so-called artifact that's titled the Los Lunas or Los Lunas Decalogue stone. If anybody's familiar with the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, especially from 1 West 125th Street that pushes that 12 tribe sign, you've probably heard of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone. Some members from GMS actually went to the location and tried to translate it. And we're going to actually go into what the experts say, what the archaeologists say, what the linguists say, and why this is largely considered pseudo-archeology. So just to get a little history on the Los Lunas stone. The Los Lunas Decalogue stone was actually found by a dude, a Catholic, I believe. I know he was some religious figure named Frank Hibben. Let me just get the Wikipedia just to get his name real quick. Is a large stone, right? So the Los Lunas Decalogue stone is a large boulder on the side of a hidden mountain near Los Lunas, New Mexico, about 35 miles south of Albuquerque, that bears a very regular inscription carved into a flat panel. Let me see the history of it. The first recorded mention of the stone is in 1993 when Professor Frank Hibben, an archaeologist from the University of New Mexico. So he's actually an archaeologist, my bad, when he saw it. But he does have a religious bias that can sometimes be conflicted. But let's go into the history. Let's see who he is first. Well, let's keep reading here. It says, according to a 1996 interview, Hibben was convinced that the inscription is ancient and thus authentic. He reported that he first saw the text in 1933. At the time, it was covered with lichen and patination and was hardly visible. He claimed he was taken to the site by a guide who claimed he had seen it as a boy back in the 1880s. However, Hibben's testimony is tainted by charges that in at least 2 separate incidents, he fabricated some or all of his archaeological data to support his pre-Clovis migration theory, which is the pre-Clovis or the Clovis migration is one of the most substantiated beliefs when it comes to where the Native Americans came from. They came from what's called the Clovis people. It comes from a town called Clovis, New Mexico, where they found a bunch of artifacts that ties Native Americans from New Mexico to Native Americans in Alaska, in a place called the Bluefish Caves. We're going to go over all this in a minute. I just want to get into the pseudo-archeology first. But let's see who Frank Hibben is. It says Frank Hibben was a well-known archaeologist whose research focused on the U.S. Southwest. As a professor at the University of New Mexico and writer of popular books and articles, he inspired many people to study archaeology. He was also controversial, being suspected of scientific fraud during his studies of Paleo-Indian cultures. So this is not something that is widely accepted. There's not what's called a scientific consensus. There's not a large consensus on on this belief that the Native Americans are Hebrew Israelites, or even spoke or wrote Hebrew. Most Native Americans didn't even have a written language. You can find the written languages amongst Mayans, Olmecs, but other than that, you can't find a written language amongst Native Americans. They didn't really develop a writing system until they came in contact with Europeans. So, so just right away you can see like this guy is controversial. He people suspected him of doing a lot of fraudulent things. Let's get the definition for pseudo-archeology also. So you can see this is not just used amongst black Hebrew Israelites who are black nationalists, black supremacists. This is used amongst a lot of different people here, even white supremacists here. It says, according to archaeologist John Hoops, writing in the magazine of the Society for American Archaeology, pseudo-archeology actively promotes myths that are routinely used in the service of white supremacy, racialized nationalism, colonialism, and the disposition and oppression of indigenous people. So a lot of this archaeology was being pushed by Mormons. Joseph Smith was known to try to push that Native Americans are Israelites. And this was actually a popular belief amongst Europeans, but there was a motive behind it. Between like the 1600s to the 1800s, the motive was colonialism, getting land, displacing or placing themselves amongst Native Americans, and then later on, getting a big following, trying to teach them Christianity and these different, Mormonism and all this stuff. So this sounds like black Hebrew Israelites. This is the same thing. Mormons push this, a lot of the same things that black Hebrew Israelites push. And I remember Marksman had Isaiah Nathan and Aparium, who are veterans of the 1 West 125th Street, ISUPK, before it, 1 West turned into whatever the hell is going on with the ICGJC today. But as you can see, now there's a bunch of different groups that just promote all this stuff. But Isaiah Nathan and Aparium was saying how the leaders of this church, the original leaders, were pushing the Book of Mormon to try to confirm or verify or substantiate why they call themselves chief priests and all of this stuff. So they're very aware of what the Book of Mormon says, and it's very similar what they're teaching, pretty much. And you'll see that in a second here. Let's go into, let's see here. Let's go into Michael Heiser here. Let's look him up real quick. Who is Michael Heiser? He is another religious man who he's known as a biblical scholar to a lot of people, and his expertise is in the Old Testament, as you can see here. But you can just watch the video on him. He's going to explain a few things better than I can. So sit back and listen.
Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. There's something fascinating about ancient inscriptions. Maybe it's the weird script or the intrigue about the source of messages left behind from the distant past. And I understand that fascination. A required course in my PhD program was ancient Semitic inscriptions. I also took courses in Egyptian hieroglyphics, many of which are found on tomb walls and obelisks and monuments. There's something about being able to decipher inscriptions in strange, weird scripts. It's fun and it's fascinating. My doctoral training actually comes in handy for our topic today. Take a look at this inscription. It's actually a copy of the Ten Commandments from the Bible. You might be thinking, well, the Ten Commandments are Jewish, but that inscription doesn't look like Hebrew. Some researchers of the inscription believe that it actually is Hebrew, specifically Paleo-Hebrew, an ancient script that derived from Phoenician that we find evidenced in the biblical world, but before the time of the Bible. What's really unusual about this inscription, though, is where it's found. You wouldn't find it in Israel. This inscription was found in Los Lunas, New Mexico. That raises all sorts of questions. Is this really an ancient Hebrew inscription? Did ancient Hebrews come to North America? And how would they have done that? What else could it be? Well, that's what we're here for. Let's find out. Los Lunas is a village in New Mexico, roughly 30 miles from Albuquerque. The Los Lunas inscription is located on what locals refer to as the Hidden Mountain. The inscription is a partial copy of the ancient biblical Ten Commandments, otherwise known as the Decalogue. Hence, the Los Lunas inscription is also referred to as the Los Lunas Decalogue. The script style is very similar to epigraphic or Paleo-Hebrew, a Hebrew script, again, from inscriptions in Israel that date to about 1000 BC. Now, this was certainly the opinion of the University of New Mexico archaeologist, the late Frank Hibben. Hibben first saw the text in 1933, and in his recollection of it, he was taken to the site by someone who had seen it as a boy back in the late 1800s. The famous Semitist, the late Cyrus Gordon, considered the inscription to possibly be genuine and perhaps a Samaritan work of the Byzantine period due to the shape of some of its letters. The inscription is considered proof by some people that ancient Israelites crossed the Atlantic in antiquity and came to North America.
Right. So there's not just the Hebrew Israelites and the Mormons. There were other people that believed this, like that professor and these two people that he just mentioned. They actually were convinced that it could have been authentic, but you'll see that there's a lot of issues found in there, and it doesn't support the 10 tribes travel theory that is promoted by these One West groups like Sakari and ISUPK, GMS, ICGJC, IUIC, GOCC. You know, a lot of all those groups promote that the 10 tribes came in 720 BC, the Israelites, which would be these Native Americans, in 720 BC. But you're going to see that when looking at the inscription, there's certain characters and certain things in there that actually date after the after 720 BC, pretty much. So it couldn't have been those Native Americans that wrote that, or the 10 tribes, the 10 lost tribes that left in 720 BC that came to America supposedly and then wrote that. They wouldn't have had access to the Hebrew that was available in the future later on, because they had already left Israel. So how could they have? You'll see. It's going to go into it, but you'll see how it's definitely not this stone. Whoever did inscribe it had access to some of the Hebrew that was already available way after 720 BC, all the way up to 200 AD, which the Hebrew at that time was completely different. So let's go into it.
Perhaps members of the lost tribes of Israel, those Israelites taken into exile in 722 BC by the conquering Assyrians. There are a number of problems with the thesis that the Los Lunas inscription is a genuine text from the hand of an ancient Israelite, or an ancient Samaritan for that matter. Had Cyrus Gordon examined the text more closely, he would have realized that the text follows the traditional Hebrew text of the Ten Commandments, the Masoretic text, and not the Samaritan version of the commandments. Now, the Samaritans were half-breed Israelites. When the Assyrians conquered Israel in 722 BC, they deported the population of 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel to various parts of their empire, and then they brought in other conquered peoples to live in Israel. They mixed the populations. The remaining Israelites and these other ethnic peoples intermarried, and their children became known as Samaritans. Now, the Samaritans had their own version of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, which were the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament. The Hebrew Bible and the Los Lunas Inscription reads, "Remember the Sabbath day," whereas the Samaritan Hebrew Bible has "Preserve the Sabbath day." And that's really a telltale difference, showing that the Los Lunas inscription is clearly not Samaritan. Now, Gordon should also have noticed that while some of the characters look similar to Samaritan letters, to their script, the Los Lunas text employs letters from several alphabets. There are Greek, Latin, and Old or Paleo-Hebrew letters.
If it had Greek and Latin in there, how could the Hebrew Israelites from 720 BC have known any Greek or Latin? Controversy.
Again, the same script as Phoenician and Moabite and a few other Semitic languages. So to this point, we can say that the Los Lunas inscription is not from the hand of an ancient Samaritan. It also isn't a Hebrew inscription because its letters are drawn from so many other ancient scripts and ancient alphabets. Another barrier to the Los Lunas inscription being an ancient Hebrew inscription is that even the letters in Hebrew script, the ones that are truly Old Hebrew, have problems. Some of the letters that look like Paleo-Hebrew are not actually precise matches to that ancient script. Here are some examples. You can see 3 examples here of, on the left-hand side, the Paleo-Hebrew letter style, and then on the right, the Los Lunas. We have the letters for D, H, and S, respectively. You can see that there are some very close matches, but not quite accurate, and then there are some that just are not the same at all. The point is that if the Los Lunas inscription had been made by an Israelite scribe who found his way somehow to North America, the inscription should not have these errors and these letter changes, the changes in style. It also, incredibly, uses a modern caret sign, that's C-A-R-E-T, sort of like that rooftop sign. That was something unknown to Hebrew manuscripts until the 16th century AD, but you actually find it in the Los Lunas inscription.
16th century AD. That's way after. That right there lets you know that this could have been done by somebody in the area, like a European, or what they call the crypto Jews. There's actually a history of crypto Jews in Los Lunas, New Mexico, and crypto Jews had to hide, that they were Jews, coming from Spain. There was a lot of persecution. People just never liked the Jews. Even black Hebrew Israelites hate them. I'm talking about the people that call themselves Jewish people, right? Who they call white European Jews or whatever. And they are half European if you go into their DNA. But there is DNA found amongst Jews that goes back to Israel and Canaan. So that's DNA evidence that does prove that. But so there's the problem with the Los Lunas stone is that, or that the problem that the Hebrew Israelites have with trying to say that the Los Lunas stone was written by Native Americans is that they can't prove that Native Americans wrote it. They don't know who wrote it. We don't know who wrote it. But we're looking at the script to see what's the best outcome, what's the best conclusion that we could come to based on the evidence. So far, the evidence is disproving what Black Hebrew Israelites and Mormons teach.
Even more, there are also grammatical mistakes in the inscription. You can see the web page and the resources and the studies on the inscription for that information. But the biggest content problem is what the inscription says, or in this case, doesn't say. The inscription is ostensibly, like we said earlier, a copy of the words of Exodus 20, 1 through 17, the Ten Commandments. But the final commandment has been shortened in the Los Lunas inscription, and parts of the second and fourth commandments in verses 4 through 6 in Exodus 20 and verses 9 through 11 in Exodus 20 have been entirely eliminated in the Los Lunas inscription. There's no way a real Israelite scribe would make those kind of mistakes or intentionally alter a sacred text, especially something as sacred as the Ten Commandments. Lastly, the Los Lunas inscription lacks the things that all such inscriptions use to promote the idea that the Israelites came to North America lack. And that is, there's no evidence of Israelite settlement in the area where it was found, and there's no inscriptional or archaeological record anywhere in North America for an Israelite transatlantic journey. So in other words, there's no provenance that explains the inscription. If the Israelites had settled in North America, in New Mexico at some point, there would be evidence of their habitation, but there simply isn't any. Now, all of these problems that we've sketched out here have convinced most scholars that the inscription is from the hand of a modern person.
So this is the consensus amongst the scholars. Not the Hebrew Israelite pseudo-scholars, not the Mormons pseudo-scholars, because they're going to find anything. They don't care how it looks, and if it doesn't confirm, they're going to find anything that confirms their belief before they even analyze it to really see, is this truly confirming my belief? They don't care. They already have a set belief, and they use the pseudo-archeology to confirm it. But they can't even explain to you who authenticated it, who wrote it, how does it go back to the 720 BC, and how does it, and first of all, this transatlantic travel theory or whatever that the Hebrew Israelites from 1 West 125th Street push is insane. It's not even biblical. First of all, it's in the Apocrypha, which is largely considered to be pseudepigrapha. But even if you want to assume it to be true, and we read 2nd Ezra 13, verse 40 through 46, 47, you can see that it's talking about them passing over a river and getting to the other side of the river, not going on a river through multiple countries into the Persian Sea, into the Indian Ocean, then across the Atlantic Ocean, and then hit the Atlantic coast of South America, North America. Where did they land? Where are the ships? First of all, we'll go into what kind of ships were typically used in the Tigris and the Euphrates River in a second, but you'll see that it's just not consistent with what the Hebrew Israelites try to teach about this Los Lunas Decalogue stone.
It's probably too harsh to call it a hoax because that sort of assumes that the creator of the inscription was intentionally trying to make people think that the Israelites had migrated to North America.
I like what he said there. That's one of the hardest things to prove in the legal system, and just, in reality, it's hard to prove intent. We don't know who wrote it. What we do have is the inscription, and we can analyze that. But we don't know who wrote it, so to assume that it's a hoax is incorrect, or that it was purposely, because these people could have just been tricked. They could have came across something that literally was inscribed maybe in the 1600s by somebody in the area that was trying to hide, maybe. That's why they went to this remote location where it shows that nobody ever encamped, nobody lived around there. So this was a remote location where maybe people would go worship. And, I don't know. So we don't want to imply that we know what was the intention of whoever did this. You know, I like the way this guy thinks.
or something like that. There seems to be a much better explanation, and for the details of this explanation, I'm going to refer viewers to our website for this episode and the work by Trey Thames, that's Thames, his last name. But I will give you the gist of his work here. I think it is a better explanation than just saying it's an outright hoax. Now, the presence of Iberian letters in the inscription, remember Iberia is ancient Spain, and its content, the Ten Commandments, suggest that the Los Lunas inscription was created by, no surprise, an Iberian Jew.
An Iberian Jew. Now, we know that Jews were coming to America ever since Christopher Columbus got here from Spain and Portugal. They were crypto Jews. There were Jews all over Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and these are white Jews, obviously, Sephardic Jews from Spain, pretty much.
Historically, we know that hundreds of thousands of Iberian Jews came to North America in the 16th century and the following centuries to escape persecution by the Catholic Church. One of those communities, believe it or not, is known to have settled in New Mexico. Now, that theory that you had an Iberian Jewish community come over in the 16th, 17th, or 18th century and actually settle in New Mexico, that accounts for all of the data and offers a demonstrable context for the data.
So what he's saying there is the data that we all have available, or that was available up to the 1600s, is found in that stone. Now, there's no way that the Native Americans who the Israelites, Black Hebrew Israelites, claim left Israel in 720 BC could have known all these grammatical usages. There's no way, because they themselves are saying that they came in 720 BC. But here we have a better explanation that accounts for why you have Latin and Greek and all this different stuff that was found on that stone.
Sure, it makes good sense and is to date the most cogent explanation for the Los Lunas inscription and all its unusual features. Thanks again for watching Fringe.
All right, so that was Michael Heiser. He did this on Fringe Pop 321. What is the YouTube channel? I mean, you see the name of the video there. Michael Heiser also debated Rakah from GOCC about the name of God, because Rakah of GOCC, the Gathering of Christ Church, they don't call God Yahweh, they call him Ahaya. And this guy, who's an expert in biblical languages and in old Hebrew language, he was trying to explain how, according to what the scripture says and what we know from the Masoretic text, they were using I am. What Ahaya is supposed to mean is he is. So, I mean, you can watch that also. You can look that up, Michael Heiser and Rakah GOCC. It was really embarrassing for Rakah. I don't know how people still follow that guy, man. He's one of the craziest Hebrew Israelites, and he has one of the biggest followings. It's crazy. But so yeah, that's just the video, the little video on the Los Lunas Decalogue. And how it just doesn't match with what these Hebrew Israelites are trying to push. Now, this is not the only one, and the Mormons also, of course. But this is not the only thing that you can find. The Newark Holy Stones is another piece of pseudo-archeology that is pushed by Hebrew Israelites and Mormons. So let's just read this. The Newark Holy Stones, Newark, Ohio, refer to a set of artifacts allegedly discovered by David Wyrick in 1860 within a cluster of ancient DNA burial mounds near Newark, Ohio, now generally believed to be a hoax. The set consists of the keystone, a stone bowl, and the Decalogue with its sandstone box. They can be viewed at the Johnson Humrick House Museum in Cashapp, Ohio. The site where the objects were found is known as the Newark Earthworks, one of the biggest collections from an ancient American Indian culture known as the Hopewell that existed from approximately 100 BC to AD 500. Let me just look up something real quick, because Glenn Beck was pushing this. Holy Hebrew stones. Yeah, right here. And Hebrew Israelites love pushing this. And look who's posting this. Look at the handle. The LDS Life. That's the Latter-day Saints. The Mormons.
606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet. 606. It's made up of stades. Exactly the same.
So this is Glenn Beck, who's a conservative. I believe he does follow Mormonism. I know he grew up Catholic, but he lives in Utah. That's Mormon Central. And let me see if there's another video here. But, I mean, y'all can go in. Y'all probably already seen this if you're familiar with the claims of the Hebrew Israelites. But, yeah, this is, the Newark Holy Stones is what he's talking about here. You can check that out later. But, yeah, let's just read about the discovery of it. Well, let's read the controversy or the radiocarbon and all of that. Yeah, we can read all of this, actually. In 2014, Bradley Lepper of the Ohio History Connection discovered that a fragment of the wooden burial platform underneath which the Decalogue stone was found had been preserved at Yale's Peabody Museum of Natural History. This sample yielded a calibrated radiocarbon date range of CAL AD 85 to CAL AD 185. So that was the wooden fragment that they carbon dated. So they could have just took that fragment, which is old, and then inscribed it later on, which is what you're going to see that they did. Since the platform had been made from an approximate 2-foot diameter oak tree, the burial itself could have been several decades later than this tree growth. These dates are consistent with the Hopewell culture that would have constructed the mound. The Newark Holy Stones are an archaeological fraud used to support the Lost Tribe theory, which posits an ancient Israelite's presence in Ohio. The idea that there is a connection between the ancient Hopewell mound builders and Jewish settlers that were in the Americas before Columbus is a form of pseudo-archeology. The first stone to be found was written in modern Hebrew. Excuse me. In July 1860, Abraham Geiger wrote in New York Times that the bungling work of an unskilled stonemason and the strangeness of some letters as well as the many mistakes and transpositions was his fault. The letters are not antique. This is not a relic of hoary antiquity. Just over 3 months later, the second stone was found. And, for everything that's claimed, you can look at the reference number here and go down and check the actual articles. I went through all of this already, and there's a few things that said the citation is needed, but for the most part, you have a citation here for everything that was said. Just over 3 months later, the second stone was found. This was not only considerably more elaborate, it was written in archaic Hebrew. Ken Feder compares this with someone today announcing that they had discovered a hitherto unknown play by Shakespeare, which was then exposed as a modern forgery, then shortly after, or thereafter, announcing the discovery of a more plausible new play. So this is what makes it even more fishy, is the fact that because the first one didn't work, they said, damn, we got to go back to the drawing board, and 3 months later, they surprisingly found another one. Like, come on, man. And look up Kenneth Feder also, because he came out with a book that lists a bunch of pseudo-archeology. He's another archaeologist. So look up Kenneth Feder. He did a whole thesis, or I know he wrote some type of, besides the book, he did a bunch of things on the pseudo-archeology, like this one here, the Newark Holy Stones, and the Los Lunas Decalogue, and some other ones that you could find around the world, here in America. There's a bunch of pseudo-archeology that propose hieroglyphics from Egypt, you know, all this crap. And, you know, it confuses and it pretty much tricks people in the black community and Hispanic community and Native Americans. You know, this is the last thing that we need is more lies. But, you know, I don't know why black Hebrew Israelites gravitate to this, what they call the archaeology and artifacts. But they don't even go into how, you know, it came about, the controversies, the hoax theories. They don't look at any of that. They just automatically assume it has to be true. Like, come on, man. Obviously, they have a bias and they want to support it by, you know, anything. They don't care how crazy it sounds. It is, all right, let's keep reading. It says, it is possible that the stones were forged to support a political viewpoint. Again, with the political stuff. I mean, this is probably the most, the biggest reason why these people, you know, push this. Even today, even these Israelites, they push it for a religious viewpoint, you know, but it can also be used for political manipulation. Brad Lepper of the Ohio Historical Society, who has extensively studied the Hopewell culture, suggests that the artifacts might have been scientifically forged to help advance the theory of monogenism, right? That there's only one God, and that pretty much that the Native Americans knew about this Hebrew God, and you know this is exactly what religion does to people here. In 1860, slavery was a subject of heated debate that was reaching a critical point in American society. Anthropology and other forms of science were often used in defense or opposition. So sometimes it could be in defense of slavery or even opposition. Sometimes people will pull a lie, you know, to try to do something, you know, to help the Native Americans. So to oppose slavery, you know, to help African Americans or whatever. But this is mainly supposed to be directed towards Native Americans having some type of connection to the Bible, you know, and knowing Jesus, pre-Columbian, which is there's no evidence of any of that. Any evidence of that is considered pseudo hoax, and then there's what's called circumstantial evidence, which is still not really good enough. You know, which you can read about. What is that book? Before Columbus, I think it's called. And there's a lot of controversy with that book too, because I mean, all they have that tries to support what they believe in that book. I forget who wrote that book. It's pretty much conjecture. It's a story that was heard by someone that somebody else told. It's like, come on, man, this is your evidence. So. You know, some of these things were used in opposition of slavery. Discussions promoting monogenism, for example, were often used to oppose slavery and segregation. Yeah. So, yeah, man. I think we have a question here. Diaz, Bubble Eyes. I have the book called History of American Indians by James Adair, and they never bring up it was arguments he raised theory. So, yeah, James Adair was somebody that what he did was make claims that Native Americans had certain customs that were similar to the Hebrew Israelites, and some of the things that he was talking about were things that can be found amongst a lot of people, agricultural things that people do when the seasons change. And Hebrew Israelites just so happen to also do those things. There's a lot of things that are not unique to Hebrew Israelites. Hebrew Israelites came out of Canaan, the Canaanites, and they learned a lot from Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamians did a lot of things that the Hebrew Israelites did. So what we have is a culture and similarities in cultures that doesn't provide you with a connection, a genetic connection. That's a culture, you know? So, I mean, but that's, again, circumstantial evidence. James Adair, Lee Eldridge Huddleston wrote a book called Origin of the American Indians. Some of the Spaniards that were saying that these Native Americans are probably Israelites were people like Diego Duran, Garcia, I forget the other guy, but I mean, there was a few people. But this was the initial response. Now we have more information than those people had today. So we're building on top of what they had, and we're seeing that, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. When you go into the Olmec language and the Mayan script and the Aztec languages, it's not related to Hebrew at all. And if you look at their gods, the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, the twin heroes that the Mayans had, all these mythology stories, right? Mythological stories of creation. It's called creation myths. That doesn't, maybe, and then James Adair also lived in the 1700s. So there were already Jews coming to America, settling around Native Americans. How do you know that the Native Americans didn't get some of these customs and words from those Jews that were coming from Spain? Because they were settling, and these Jews from Spain were settling amongst a lot of Native Americans, Cherokee Indians, and all of that. There's evidence of that. There's evidence of them trading languages and even adopting certain languages and taking certain words from each other. So that's some of the other so-called evidence that's pushed by Black Hebrew Israelites, Mormons, and people that want to push the idea that Native Americans are from the 12 tribes of Israel. But let me see here. Now it says, among some of the hoax theories is that Wyrick faked the artifacts and planted them at the excavation sites. Prior to his discovery, Wyrick supported the belief that the lost tribes of Israel were ancestors of ancient mound builders in Ohio. So even before all of that was found, he already had that belief. So, somebody could. I'm not saying that this Wyrick guy was the one that actually created it, because you're gonna see that there were other people there was somebody that actually admitted that they helped create this. But that this dude Wyrick who found it could have just been convinced by other people or tricked by other people, because he wasn't somebody that can really analyze this and come to an educated conclusion about what the hell it is that he's looking at. So Wyrick spent a great deal of time searching a number of excavation sites in various mounds, attempting to find supporting evidence of this belief. Some argue that Wyrick could have become more desperate as time went by, providing the motivation to commit such an act. So, in 1861, Wyrick published a pamphlet that described his account of the artifact's discovery. So, let me see. Okay, let's keep reading. The publishing included woodcuts of the inscriptions found on the stones. When comparing Wyrick's woodcuts of the Decalogue to the actual inscription found on the stone, Wyrick made at least 38 errors involving 256 Hebrew letters. Mistakes include illegible and omitted letters. Wyrick's depiction of Moses on the woodcuts had inconsistencies as well. Wyrick shows Moses wearing a beret instead of a turban. He also shows Moses in the 19th century dress instead of the flowing robe shown on the stone. Some believe that the person or group responsible for the inscription had to have an extensive knowledge of the Hebrew language. Given that Wyrick made a large number of mistakes on the woodcuts, seem to indicate that he may not have been the stone's author. Beverly H. Mosley, Jr., former art director of Ohio Historical Society, compared the carving of Moses on the stone to Wyrick's woodcut copy. He concluded that both images couldn't have been made by the same person. After Wyrick's death, Colonel Charles Whittlesey published a paper in 1872 in which he recalls discovering a Hebrew Bible amongst Wyrick's personal items. Whittlesey concludes at the time that the stones were a hoax and assumed that the Bible was Wyrick's source of inspiration for the inscription. This theory was later discredited after it was determined that the letters used on the Decalogue did not represent a style that would have been consistent with the theory. The Hebrew version used in the inscription is another point of contention. The version used was post-exilic, which would not be from a lost tribe. Yeah, the 10 tribes were pre-exilic. So how could they have this information from post-exilic, languages and writing systems? Some believe, all right, continue. Some believe this is another example that shows the artifacts were either a hoax or did not date back to the time of the mound builders. So the mound builders were that was authentic. They can date that back way back, but it didn't match the inscriptions. Where are we at? Okay. The version used was post-exilic, which would not be from a lost tribe. Some believe this is another example that shows the artifacts were either a hoax or did not date back to the time of the mound builders. Warwick also made a claim in a letter he wrote to Joseph Henry in 1863, 1 year before his death, that he might have been a victim of a hoax. So he started denying it. He started, what do you call it? Doubting it. So, let me see if I could. Yeah, so they have see also the Los Lunas Decalogue stone and the Bat Creek inscription, which is another one that was a proven hoax. We'll go into that next. But, here's all the references. Here's the Kenneth Fetter book that I was talking about. Kenneth Fetter is a professor of archaeology at Central Connecticut University and the author of several books on archaeology and criticism of pseudo-archeology, such as frauds, myths, and mysteries. So the book is called Encyclopedia of Dubious Archaeology, From Atlantis to the Walum Ulum. All right, so let me see here. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the Keystone. There were other stones found at the Newark site, like the Keystone. 2 other stones were also found at Newark shortly after Warwick's death. They have since been lost. These stones were quickly dismissed as fakes when the local dentist, John H. Nichol, claimed that he had carved and introduced the stones to the site. So somebody actually admitted to this, a dentist. A 5th stone was allegedly found at the same site as the Decalogue stone. 2 years later, by David M. Johnson, a banker, and Nathaniel Rowe Bradner, a physician, named the Johnson-Bradner stone. It has since been lost. A lithograph of the stone published in France still survives, which I think this is it right here. But yeah, so, this is the evidence that the so-called evidence that Black Hebrew Israelites like to promote. None of the experts are saying that this is authentic. They're finding lots of errors and a lot of inconsistencies with how these things have come about as you're reading. How you gonna have a stone that I guess found 1 month or 3 months earlier that was conclusively a hoax, and then they try to come out with a better one later. I mean, it's obvious what's going on here, right? But let's look at something that's actually a little bit more authentic. What's this? What we have is the Nazario collection. Now this has actually been authenticated as an official artifact. But it says Diaz on the comment section here saying, I've seen over the years there's always information to debunk people's so-called religious beliefs, such as the book called Lost Tribes and Promised Lands, those Indians who were on the canoe. Right, Lost Tribes and Promised Lands. I heard about that, but well, I mean, I actually have that book. I heard about it. I actually own it. I bought that book. I have Lost Tribes and Promised Land. I have Origin of the American Indian. I have From Babylon to Timbuktu. I have all of that. But the Lost Tribes and Promised Land was a claim made that the tribe of Joseph was on an island nearby, right? And this is what Arya of the ICGJC, at the time it was the ISUPK. This is what he used, a claim in a book by somebody that was saying that the tribe of Joseph is in an island nearby. They said, okay, well, that is Puerto Rico. So Diaz is saying, I was a part of ICUPK in the 90s, then ICGJC from Oklahoma City. All right, greetings, man. I'm, ICGJC alumni over here. 2006 Hebrew Academy graduate right here, Orlando, Florida. And I did a lot of research on the Seminole Indians. Now, look at the 12 tribes sign. Let's look at that real quick, and we'll go into the Nazario collection next, because that's actually interesting. That one. I'm sorry, 12 tribes sign. Right. So going into the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad, which is supposed to be the Native Americans and the Seminole Indians. Let's just get a generic image here of the 12 tribes. So 12 tribes of Israel. We got, where's Gad? Right. So here's one. Man, I mean, where's Reuben at? Yeah, Seminole. They added Aborigines of Australia here. This is crazy. I don't know what group this is, but you see how Reuben it says Seminole Indians, and then Gad it says North American Indians. Reuben is, or the Seminole Indians are North American Indians. Florida's in North America. Now the Canadians. This is an interesting thing with the Canadians. Canadian Indians. There's no doubt that Alaskan Indians, let's do that. There's no doubt that the Alaskan Indians are related to what's called Siberians and the Inuit people. Maybe if I type that in. Now, a lot of them that you speak to, they won't say that Alaskans are Native Americans. They'll say that Alaskans, that some of them are Native Americans. But wait, hold on. How are some of them Native Americans? How did the non-Israelite Alaskans or Canadians or whatever, how did they get to Alaska and Canada? Obviously, there has to be another explanation. And the explanation is not hard. The explanation is there. Let's just read it real quick. Here's an EDU website, which is more official here. Although the name Eskimo was commonly used in Alaska to refer to Inuit and Yupik people of the world, this usage is now considered unacceptable by many or even most Alaska natives, largely since it is a colonial name imposed by non-indigenous people. Alaska natives so they don't even like that name Eskimo. Alaska natives increasingly prefer to be known by the names they use in their own languages, such as Inupiaq or Yupik. Now this don't sound like Hebrew. This don't sound like Hebrew at all. Definitely don't sound like the damn Hebrew that we were taught, the so-called Lashawan Kodash. Inuit is now the current term in Alaska and across the Arctic. So yeah, this is what the term that I need to start using, because they don't like that Eskimo thing. But Inuit is a better term anyways, because it actually gives you more in-depth look at how the Alaskans, how they got there and where they migrated from, because Inuits have a connection to Siberians. You're going to see that. But yeah, so now that's the current term in Alaska and across the Arctic, and Eskimo is fading from use. The Inuit Circumpolar Council prefers the term Inuit. All right, so let's see. Linguists believe that Eskimo is derived from blah, blah, blah. I don't know if this is what I want to read here. Inuit people. Blah, blah, blah. Let's just look up the Inuit people. Let's see what it says here. Let's see if I can get some of these references and just go straight to the reference. Right, all right, so let me see if it tells you here. Let me see if I can show you a map. Let's just read it from the top. The Inuit, the people, singular, Inuk, are a group of culturally similar indigenous people inhabiting the Arctic regions of Greenland, Canada, and Alaska. The Inuit languages are part of the Eskimo-Aleut languages, also known as Inuit Yupik. I'm sorry, I don't think Inuit is actually. Let me keep reading. Inuit Sign Language is a critically endangered language isolate used in Nunavut. Inuit live throughout most of northern Canada in the territory of Nunavut, Nunavik in the northern third of Quebec. I don't know how to pronounce some of these words. In Labrador and various parts of the Northwest Territories, particularly around the Arctic Ocean. Yeah, so, oh yeah, here we go. If we can get like a little map so you can see. So going up from Canada, let me get a better map here. You can get a world map. Well, actually, let's go into Beringia. If you type Beringia, which is the landmass in between Alaska and what you call it, and Siberia and Russia, pretty much, you can see that there's actually a connection of languages, animals, which is called fauna, plant life, which is called flora, all throughout here, northeast Russia and through Alaska. And you can see the water levels are actually deeper when you go outside of this area. The water levels down here are pretty low, and they have done some excavations, some underwater excavations, but it's pretty difficult to date certain things once they're underwater. But if you look at the migration, now you have a connection between Alaskans and Siberians. Then you also have a connection between Alaskans and people from Greenland. So let me go back to that world map. So we could just look at the whole thing here. All right, now. Where is Greenland? So Greenland would be. Let's see if I can view this closer. Hate some of these websites, man. They're gonna push out a bunch of ads. All right, so if we zoom in. Oh, I have to keep doing this, man. But this is Siberia over here on the left side. This is Russia and all that. This is Alaska, and then you got Greenland up here. So there's a connection between Native Americans. There was different migrations into America, that's why. So there's a connection between Siberians and Central Americans or Mesoamericans. And there's a connection between them and the Alaskans and Native Americans. All throughout North, South, and Central America, you find a genetic connection and you find some language connection also. The Inuit language can be found mostly up here, Alaska, this part of Canada, and Greenland. So, yeah, a little off track there, but let's go to the Nazario collection now, because this is something else that's used by Hebrew Israelites, and I believe, what's his name, Nathaniel from IUIC. Come on, man, they're not letting me check this out. I believe Nathaniel from IUIC went to actually visit this guy that is dealing with the collection right now, because Nazario was a Catholic priest he's not alive anymore. But damn, where is this at? These cats, I can't even open this no more. I think I went into it too much. The Miami Herald did an article on it. Let me see. Hebrew Stones, Miami Herald. Diaz, I think what you said, a lot of Chinese went into Mexico, I think. I don't think they were Chinese specifically. They mostly come from Siberia or East Asia, but then there is a connection between East Asians, which goes even further back, and Japanese. So more Japanese than Chinese is what I'm finding from Northeast Asians. They have a bigger connection to Japan than what you call it, China. And if you look at some of the Olmecs, because people love to say that, oh, the Olmecs look Africans, but not the one, not from what I'm seeing. There's a few of them that maybe you can say, yeah, it looks African. Look, their noses are broad, but I mean, from what I'm seeing here, these look kind of Asian to me, especially this one. I mean, look at that. You gonna tell me that looks like an African? Like, come on, man. They do look kind of Japanese here. Look at these San Lorenzo. You know, you can look up the archaeology found in San Lorenzo, and you can find some of them in yoga positions and stuff, which is another interesting thing. I don't think it's been proven that they did yoga, but I mean, some of them do look like they're positioned in yoga positions, pretty much. I like this right here. I remember going into this a while ago. You know, they're showing how. I hate this Quora website. They always come up with this, but you know, because people like to show African Americans next to these statues. You know, here are some Mexicans next to these statues. So you can see, and it's really hard to just look at a depiction of a statue and say this is the depiction of an African, or to specify their genetics, go into their genetic makeup just by looking at them. Like, yeah, you can get certain features, but this is a depiction. This is not the actual body. Look, what the hell is this? They got George Floyd here next to the Olmec. See what I'm saying? Oh man, did they really post this about Ethiopia? See, this is some of the fake stuff that be going around in the black community, man. There's a lot of pseudo-archeology and stuff. Now look at the one here from Ethiopia. You see how it says Ethiopia is a little cut off? And they think that was already in Ethiopia, that it was made by Africans. This statue in Ethiopia was actually gifted to the Ethiopians by Mexicans, by the Mexican government. So it has nothing to do with Africans. And I think there was one of them people from the House of Consciousness that actually went out there and tried to push that you see, we have an Olmec here in Ethiopia. So that means there's a connection. Yeah, the connection is that the Mexican government actually gave it to them, man. And the Olmecs go way back, way before 720 BC. You know, but yeah, I mean, these are some of the statues that can be found. You can see these images of the Olmec. I mean, if you look at Mexicans and how they look, compare it, you know, to some of these images, like, I mean, you can do that too. So, you know, and they look more similar if you want to go by that. But not only that, there's a lot of there's a lot of bodies. This is better than languages or a stone, you know, that was found with Hebrew that you don't know who wrote it. What's better than that is actually finding genetics, a body, you know, a frozen child that was found in Siberia, a frozen child that was found in Alaska that has a connection to Native Americans and Asians. What they call the Sunrise Child, the Anzac 1 boy, the Anzac 2, the Wicker Man, I think it was another one that was found. We'll go over that in a minute. Let me go back to the Hebrew stones. Let me see if I can pull this up, man. You see how they locked me out of this? Oh, this ain't it. Where is it at? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so let's see if we can read this. Oh, damn. Come on. Let me see if they'll let me. Here we go again. I shouldn't have clicked that. Maybe later. Thank you. For more information, I don't want to go to the Wikipedia page, man, because there's something that's mentioned in the Miami Herald article that shows you like these aren't. This is not even Hebrew. It's actually um, Phoenician. That's what it is. Let me see. Which is where Hebrew comes from, you know. But that was years, you know, a lot of years way before Hebrew. Damn, man. Let me read none of this stuff. See? Damn. These cats. Alright, well, I guess we gotta go to the Nazario collection. I mean, the Wikipedia page has a lot of good information on it anyway. Yeah, I know. Those stones, Diaz, in the comment section there, I'm going to go into that right now. But it's not Hebrew. I will read it. And we don't know who wrote it either, because what the problem is that there's no context, right? Like, the context doesn't match with the petroglyphs that are found amongst Native Americans. Let's go into some of those petroglyphs, or let's just look at them real quick, and then we'll go right back. Native American, yeah. So this is a lot of what's found. Petroglyphs is how they used to communicate. There wasn't a writing system in Puerto Rico, for the Taínos, Arawaks. The writing system was developed later on, after the Europeans already got there. They had the words, but there was no writing system. But these are the petroglyphs. This is what you see. You see all of this right here? You can find this all throughout North America, Canada, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, which where my family's from is Dominican Republic. The only evidence of Jewish history in the Dominican Republic were the Jews that came to Puerto Plata in the north part of Dominican Republic, that were running away from Nazis during the time of Hitler and all of that in 1930. And the dictator Trujillo, who was a horrible damn dictator, he actually allowed the Jews to come and settle, some Jews to come and settle in Dominican Republic, as they were doing in Argentina. You know, there's crypto Jews all over the place. They were hiding from Nazis. And yeah. But let's go into this real quick. It says that the Nazario collection. So they're not Hebrew. They're Phoenician. They're also called the Phoenician rocks. And it says that they're a catch of carved stones that originated in Guayanilla, Puerto Rico. According to contemporary accounts, the statuettes made of local serpentine rocks were first discovered by Catholic priest Jose Maria Nazario and Cancel during the 19th century, and featured unidentified petroglyphs that have been speculated to be connected to the Old World for over 130 years. These are the petroglyphs. A petroglyph is an image created by removing part of a rock surface by incising, picking, carving, or abrading as a form of rock art. Outside North America, scholars often use terms such as carving, engraving, or other descriptions, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we already know what that is, but let's read right here. Nazario would combine his research with his religious background. This is where the issue comes in, man. It's the religious belief that's driving people towards this stuff, leading to the hypothesis, not even a theory, that there might be some connection between them and the 10 lost tribes. Now, this is not what's believed anymore. You're going to see that Reynel Rodriguez, the archaeologist that's been dealing with this for like the last 15 or 10 years, he doesn't even believe that they're from the Israelites or 10 lost tribes, which he originally did. And he's changed that belief ever since they've done more dating, because the rocks are dated to be really old. But the inscriptions, I believe, were only dated to the 14 to the 1500s. So there were already Jews in Latin America during that time that came from Spain. So how do we know that they didn't do that and leave it with the Native Americans, and the Native Americans thought it was, they thought it was healing. Puerto Ricans or Tainos, they thought it was healing rocks. And why did they think that? I mean, did they really have any healing power? No. Is that a Hebrew Israelite belief that rocks can heal people? Like, Hebrew Israelites like to say that, well, the Hebrew Israelites, the Native Americans, the Latinos, we all lost our heritage. So you don't know, they didn't know that they're Israelites. But yet they try to come up with things like this that shows that they did know, that they did speak Hebrew. So it's like, which one is it? So let's just read it. Due to the ramifications that their authentication would have on mainstream concepts of Pan-American history, the authenticity of the pieces has been in question from the onset, with researchers providing conflicting opinions, right? That was in the beginning. There was a lot of conflicting opinions. They are authentic. They were dismissed for a long time, but you're going to see how they are authentic. It doesn't mean that the Puerto Ricans are Hebrew Israelites. You're going to see. So we got to be really careful about what we use and what we say with what we have, It is authentic, but what are we going to say about this Hebrew that was inscribed on there? That because of that, Puerto Ricans are Israelites? That doesn't connect. There needs to be more evidence to confirm that. And that's why this is an issue, because it's out of context. It doesn't go with everything else that we know about Native Americans. So that's why people were dismissing it. But you're going to see that it might have some historical value. I mean, that it does have historical value, actually. Let me see. So, I mean, I don't want to go into the history. I just want to go into what they say about it right now. Because you see, they got the early research. That is, you can't compare it to what we know today. Diaz, he says in the comments, here on the live, he says, I live in Puerto Rico and seen a lot of weird different stuff in stones. Word. Let's see here. Blah, blah, blah. Late 20th century Phoenician Hypothesis. Recent research. Let's do this. In 2012, research on the pieces returned to the mainstream academia with the involvement of Rainiel Ramos from the University of Puerto Rico. So that's him right here in the picture. Rainiel Rodriguez Ramos. And this guy is an actual archaeologist. So, it's nothing to just dismiss immediately. Like, this actually has some value to it. So, and could it be that could Hebrew Israelites have come to Puerto Rico, or maybe some Jews came to Puerto Rico before Columbus? That's a possibility, but that's like a very unlikely possibility. I mean, I wouldn't say it's unlikely. It's just there's no evidence that supports any pre-Columbian visits to America, other than what we know, the little bit that we know about Polynesians coming probably from Easter Island to South America. But some scholars say that it was actually the other way around, that the Native Americans came from South America to Easter Island. But Polynesians definitely made it to America, because there's some DNA of Polynesians amongst Colombians. If you type up Colombians and Polynesians, Polynesian DNA in Colombia, just real quick, man, go into a bunch of different things. Let me see, Polynesian DNA in Colombia. Because they actually did studies on this. So, it's not just Native Americans coming from Siberia. It's very little trace genetics of Polynesian DNA in Colombia. Native Americans and Polynesians met around 1200 AD. That's in the Smithsonian Mag. And DNA reveals Native American presence in Polynesia. So yeah, I mean, they don't know how they met, how they came in contact, where they came in contact, but Native Americans and Polynesians definitely came in contact. And if you look at Hawaiians and Native Americans, Alaskans, they all look the same. But Hebrew Israelites would say, no, Hawaiians are not Hebrew Israelites, but they look they're connected to Alaskans. They're genetically connected to Alaskans, like, and Polynesians and all of that too. So there's a connection. There's a connection there. Now I don't want to go off and just read that because we were going into the Nazaria collection. All right, so blah, 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 university, yeah. So he's that's the University of Puerto Rico at Utuado. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Who was concerned that up to that point, most of the local research had been carried by historians. During his first visit to the ICP, he encountered part of the collection being repurposed and the rest in storage. While attending an activity in the British Museum in 2014, Rodriguez took some pieces with him to the cuneiform exhibit, where he was casually presented to C.B.F. Walker while showing Jago Cooper a copy of Host's letter to the now retired cuneiform expert. None of the present gave a definitive answer to their nature, but agreed that further study was needed. Parallel to this process, a documentary began being prepared by cinematographer Carlos Garcia in collaboration with Rodriguez and his team. All right, I don't want to read too much. That's not what I want to get to. Okay, right here. The archaeologists discuss how to proceed with people from a number of fields, including geology, chemistry, and physics. To determine the chemical characteristics of the pieces, Antonio Martinez of the Physics Department of the UPR and Pablo Gerandi of General Studies at University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus, have been involved in an initiative to complete studies on X-ray diffraction and spectrography in order to further pinpoint the properties of the prime matter. In order to determine the characteristics of the traces, the high power of microscopes of the UPRRP were used to carry out high magnification studies in which perpendicular striations were noted as part of the pointer drag technique. Some pieces do display characters that were added later than those in others, implying that some were created afterwards. Yeah, so I mean, there were a bunch of stones found, and a lot of them were actually, some of them were not authentic, but some of them were. I think there were 800 stones, and I think like 300 of them were authentic or something like that. However, the manner in which some of the pieces have been intemporized, in particular the presence of differential intemporization in some that has rounded the edges of fractures in only one of the sides, is inconsistent with them being fabrications that were forged in the late 1870s. So they knew they wasn't made in the 1870s. It wasn't inscribed. So it's not a hoax. This wasn't done like to trick people, which is different from the Los Lunas and this other one. This one is actually official. But let's read if this came from the 10 tribes of Israel in 1720 BC or 1722. Let's see. Damn, where are they gonna? Okay, here we go. Carlos Silva of University del Turabo has been involved in the 3D scanning of the pieces. The high-definition imaging has led to the interest of philologist Christopher Ralston, whom Rodriguez considered a candidate to attempt the falsification of the Old World hypothesis. Studies in the thermoluminescence have been proposed to establish the last time the rocks were set on fire. Some of the artifacts were burned after the traces were made, with the pieces that fragmented during the process being plausible candidates. Others have carbon remnants that could be dated by employing the C14 method, a procedure that resulted in a range of 900 BC to 900 AD. Now that's a wide range, and that's just for the rocks. I don't know if that's talking about the inscription, because later on I believe it's going to say it's from the 1400s, but let's keep reading, man. Let me see where that's at. If this is the link here, number 5 and 2. The general plan is to send separate pieces to the University of Washington Luminescence Dating Laboratory and to Oxford Authentication to compare results, which Rodriguez considers possibly conclusive towards this end. He has requested additional support. Okay, so let's see here. In summer of 2019, the results of 2 independent examinations of the pieces were published. The first, carried by Ralston, concludes that the glyphs in the pieces believed by Rodriguez to be ancient were not falsified by Nazario, and they likely represent a form of writing, which was organized within register lines. However, the specialist distanced from the transatlantic hypothesis and stated that it most likely represents an autochthonous system. In a subsequent interview, Ralston also argued that these symbols are not Mesoamerican writing. They're not Aztec or Mayan. They're definitely not that. So, this shows you that the language of Mesoamericans, like the Aztec, Mayans, and the Olmecs, pretty much don't resemble any Phoenician or Hebrew or any of that. But that's just a little side note. Generic symbols with analogs in other languages were observed. Another held on 20 pieces by a team led by Iris Groman, whatever, and carried at the Useware Analysis Laboratory of Haifa, University of Haifa's Zinman Institute of Archaeology, reaffirmed the presence of long-term weather degradation and determined that stone tools were used in the carving of the characters. Traces of gold and red pigment were also found. That's interesting. But the weather, what they're saying is that the weather degraded it a lot. So they dated it again. I'm trying to see if I could find that. Potential hypothesis. Okay, so let's just finish it off. This is the end of it. Based on his research, Rodriguez has formulated a number of hypotheses that are being currently examined without taking an priori position about their authenticity or the possibility of a fraud. They're trying to do independent, pretty much. They're trying to be neutral, pretty much. With his initial position taken under consideration that some pieces were likely created after the initial discovery. So some pieces were created after the initial discovery, but the initial discovery did yield some positive results. Even if this dates back to the 1400s and 1500s, it's still valuable, pretty much. If they wrote this Hebrew, if these were Jews that came pre-Columbus, that's something that we need to know. And this could be a sign of a pre-Columbian visitation by Jews to Puerto Rico. Maybe it was just a small crew and maybe they never made it back. Who knows? Because what we do know is that there's not a heavy population of Hebrews. There's not a lot of artifacts found of Hebrews that connects it. It's very little. So what that tells me is that maybe there were a few Jews that were amongst these Native Americans, but let's keep reading. With his initial position taken under consideration that some of the pieces were likely created after the initial discovery, if the entire collection was proven to be fraudulent, he argued that the age of the pieces made them archaeological artifacts in their own right. He also formulated a preliminary hypothesis if several of the pieces were certified as authentic, for which he tried to identify similar geodistic characters. Rodriguez also noted that religious idols found in the Canary Islands exhibit similar posture and facial features, which were not discovered until after the pieces were reportedly unearthed, and he argues that Nazario could not have known. The preliminary character analysis found that some were similar to Libco-Berber alphabet found in Archipelago. You see Libco-Berber? After the initial studies, a set of cave paintings was uncovered near Playa Los Tubos, which Rodriguez decided to capture and send to Renata Springer-Bunk, a philologist who has authored several books about the Libco-Berber characters at the Canary Islands, who responded with the affirmative about their nature, but lost interest after being told that they were found in Puerto Rico. People think that these are all lies. It's a lot of lies being spread out there, based on religion, which is what turns people off. Ultimately, he combined these with the seafaring nature of Caribbean natives And studies like one in which archaeologist Richard Thomas Callahan of the University of Calgary studied how far the Canary Current could have dragged a drifting vessel to formulate a hypothesis he wanted to falsify. Following the 2019 studies, Rodriguez distanced from previous stances considered Nazario's 10 lost tribe hypothesis as falsified. So this is what the actual professor believes now, that they had it wrong initially, but there's still value to these stones. Since the similarities that were previously noted were insufficient to account for the fundamental differences found in the way that the languages were written, supporting Ralston's conclusions, which it's showing you right here that Nazario was wrong about the 10 tribes theory. So, however, he noted that the way they were kept under the custody of a select group was rare, seen in cases such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, and was quoted as saying that the hands that made these are different from the hands that made other artifacts in Puerto Rico. So that's what's out of context. That's what lets people know that these Puerto Ricans or these Tainos, the people that were native to Puerto Rico, they weren't doing these type of inscriptions. This was done by somebody or some people that wasn't that didn't represent most of that population. They probably was a few Jews that were living them. This is what I believe. But then the Lipko Berber, let me see if we can look this up, because this goes to like Lipko Berber. Yeah, Lipko Berber goes back to Egyptian, like North Africa and all of that. And what we do know is that there was one of the richest kings named Mansa Musa, who people say that, oh yeah, he did come to America. People were claiming that he had ships, that he came to America, and maybe he did. Maybe he had people come out here that never made it back, or that never reported it. Maybe there's no record of this visitation, and this might be a little bit of evidence that does show you that maybe there was some traveling here before the Jews, before the Spanish came. Which some of the Spanish were Jews, but this is just another theory. But there's not a lot of evidence to support this stuff. It's just, they know that it's authentic, and that the dates go back. They go back to a long time ago. So it couldn't have been Father Nazario, that that conspired with this hoax or whatever. They know it's not that. But is it Hebrew? No. Is it related to the 10 tribes of Israel? No. So let's see. It says, however, so the hands that made these are different from the hands that made other artifacts in Puerto Rico. Rodriguez did not completely dismiss the possibility of intercontinental travel, stating that these stones could potentially be the first robust evidence to begin having a discussion about the possibility of pre-Nautis, or pre-Columbian mariners, and that they questioned the meta-narrative that Columbus brought writing and history with him, effectively pushing the definition of Puerto Rican history back thousands of years. In regards to other hypotheses, he is skeptical of Fell's conclusions and notes that some of the words that the zoologist translated as phonetic Quechan, such as yucca, unge, and chayote or papaya, are in fact Arawak origin. Right, that's like Quechuan is South American, Peruvians speak Quechuan. But here's some of the references, but yeah, that's the Nazario collection. And as you see, this doesn't support no 10 lost tribes, transatlantic travel, nothing. It doesn't support any of that. So this, 12 tribe sign pushed by Hebrew Israelites is just, it's not conclusive. There's no evidence that can conclusively confirm this. There's actually evidence against this. let's go more into some of the evidence I was talking about here about the sunrise child, you know, and what the ancient Americans kind of tools and, you know, they use and how they're connected to Alaska and all of that. Let me see if I can pull this up. Let's zoom in. Let me zoom in. Oh no, right here. Zoom in. Yeah, these are all the Clovis or fluted points that were found in North America. Now, you can look up the Paleo-Indian database of the Americas, and it pretty much shows you a map of all the archaeological sites and artifacts. You see all these sites that are found, and it connects it all the way up here to Alaska. And the Clovis is called the Clovis points, right? They were found in Clovis, New Mexico was the first ones, I believe, that were found. And they call these Clovis fluted points, which were at the end of the spears that were used by Native Americans, which is technology. It's a tool that, you know, shows a common designer from South America, Central America, North America, going all the way up to Alaska. You know, you can look that up. Some good information there. I'm going to go into this also. Yeah, these are some of the Clovis points that were found that connects pretty much Native Americans to Siberians, you know, and even going back to, what is it, the Bluefish Caves? If you guys ever heard of the Bluefish Caves, let me see if I can find that. It's a very important archaeological site related to Native Americans. Bluefish Caves is an archaeological site in Yukon, Canada, located 54 kilometers southwest of blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let's see. Right. Bluefish Cave was initially known to the local First Nations, but was popularized by a fishing expedition in 1976 and later by researchers. Let me see. Right, so here, the Old Crow Flats in the Yukon, Canada, right? Another important area with early human presence are located about 75 kilometers northeast of the Bluefish Caves. Now here, the site was excavated by archaeologist Jacques Cinq-Mars between 1977 and 1987. They spent 10 years on this, man, over 10 years. And the initial radiocarbon dating suggested an age of 24,000 years before present. This was considered controversial as it was in contrast to the Clovis first theory. So Clovis people definitely migrated to America, but now they're saying that they weren't first. Widely accepted by academics at the time, which considered the earliest settlement date of North America to be around 13,000 BP, right? 13,000 BC is what it means. A review of the site in 2017 found it to be 24,000 years old and lending support to the Beringian standstill hypothesis that the ancestors of Native Americans spent considerable time isolated in a Beringian refuge during the last glacial maximum before populating the Americans. So you got Beringia, Pendejo Cave. That's funny. But, you know, this is all connected to the Siberians pretty much. Let me see if we can look up this video here. Siberia, origin of Native American. Let's look this right here. Do you know where Native Americans come from? This is
Did you
made
know
by
that
Russia
it's
Beyond.
scientifically proven that Native Americans come from Siberia? Since the 18th century, ethnographers and archaeologists have been arguing that there are strong cultural and ethnic similarities between Native Americans and the people of Siberia. So what are those similarities? Well, first of all, appearance and clothes. Apparently, Siberians and Native Americans even look alike. Distinctive cheekbones, an upright posture, and dusky skin. In the 19th century, famous explorer Fridtjof Nansen called Evenks, the indigenous people of eastern Siberia, the Indians of Siberia. Both Siberians and Native Americans dressed themselves in clothes made of deer skin, which makes sense, with deer the main breeding cattle. But what is striking is how similar the ornaments and types of embroidery used to decorate their clothing was. Next, religion and beliefs. Shamanism, belief in the afterlife, and the power of spirits are prevalent for both cultures. Even skin tambourines are used by both Siberian and Indian shamans. In both cultures, they worship the spirit of fire and believe in the world tree as...
So make a note of all of that. Skin tambourines, spirit of fire, the shamans, the embroidery, the clothes, all of this. It's all stacking on to the genetics, which is the most conclusive evidence. I mean, genetics deals with a body. You know, this is, I mean, what more evidence do you need other than DNA evidence that connects one person to another? You got a whole body. And these Hebrew Israelites want to look at some random stone found in New Mexico. Like, what? How does that prove that Native Americans are connected to the Israelites? That doesn't prove that. You see how bad the evidence is when you really start analyzing it, and how good this evidence is, how much more conclusive and just believable it is.
The main pillar of existence. Low alcoholic beverages feature in ceremonies, and while the drinks differ, corned beer for Indians and milk vodka for Siberians, the ritual stays the same. All gather in a circle and drink from one cup, passing it on to the next. Both Siberians and Indians used tattoos as spiritual signs. Their houses looked alike too. Teepees and chums were go-to structures for both Siberians and Native Americans. And then the language. A connection exists between Siberian and Native American languages. In early 18th century, German naturalist Georg Steller, who traveled to Kamchatka and then to North America, argued that either the people of Kamchatka and North America communicated somehow with each other, or Native Americans are the same people as Kamchadals, or are somehow derived from them. After more than a century of speculation, geneticists have proven that Aztecs, Incas, and Iroquois are closely related to the people of Altai, the Siberian region that borders China and Mongolia. Listen to this. Fearless nomadic hunters with strong tribal traditions who believe in the powers of nature and honor spirits of the deceased. This sounds true for both Native Siberians and Native Americans. Here's some more evidence for you. In 2008, it was confirmed that the language family of Central Siberia shares a mother tongue with dozens of Native American languages. Researcher Edward
Language. Now the language.
spent several years in Siberia studying the almost forgotten Ket with dozens of Native American languages. Researcher Edward Vajda
I gotta look that up later, but make a note of that.
several years in Siberia studying the almost forgotten Ket language. His research links the Russian Yeniseian family of extinct languages to the Nadene family of languages.
Oh, that's what it was. I thought it was the Inuit. That's what we were going into before.
By the broad group of present-day Athabascan tribes in the US and Canada. Other evidence is based on genetics and archaeological finds. A skeleton of a 4-year-old boy found in South Siberia in the late 1920s.
George Rua, what's good, man? He's saying in the live chat here, Shalom, Ak. Nah, Ak, facts don't matter. We are the real Jews. My bad.
Led to a fascinating discovery in 2013. These were the oldest human remains from which DNA was extracted. A genetic study of a 24,000-year-old skeleton housed in the Hermitage State Museum in St. Petersburg showed that the boy's DNA had close genetic ties to the DNA of present-day Native Americans. It shows that they carried up to 38% of the genes of the Altai people.
38% is huge, especially considering the time that passed. There was a lot of time that passed. And what happens is called genetic drift. And the genes would change. Genes mutate, you know. They evolve over time, especially if you're moving and migrating to a different part of the world, a different ecosystem. That changes over time. Your genetics will change, but this is a big connection.
It's not the first archaeological find that suggests that Native Americans and Siberians are related. Let's go back to the 1960s. Soviet historian Nikolai Dikov had found 15,000-year-old human remains in Kamchatka, a region in Russia's Far East. The tomb was unusual for the region. The skeleton was covered in red ochre, just like in the burial traditions of the North American natives. This had led Dikov to believe that ancestors of Native Americans migrated from Siberia. Also, in 2013, two of the world's leading scientific magazines, Nature and Science, published articles about the analysis of whole genomes in Native Americans.
So these are official, like reputable, peer-reviewed evidence right here from reputable sources, Nature, Science. These magazines you don't catch them putting out fake information, man. If you do, they go back and fix it. If you can find something, that's what's good about science, is that it's not dogmatic. Like a religious belief is not going to change. The Hebrew Israelites are not going to change their 12 tribe sign. They're going to look horrible if they do that, But the thing is that when it comes to evidence, you always got to keep your mind open, because right now we don't have all the evidence, for everything. We don't have all the answers for everything. But what we do know, we can use that and come to good conclusions of what's most likely true. And this is what we have.
Their Siberian cousins. The first study analyzed 48 people from Brazil. The second study analyzed 31 genomes from people in the US and Siberia. And the results from both studies confirmed that the ancestors of Native Americans left Siberia about 20 to 30,000 years ago. By the way, scientists already know how humans traveled to the Americas from Altai. Instead of...
I would say, Diaz, from the comment you said, what she's doing is basically no different from what James Adair did, right? Well, the genetics. It's not just her. It's the geneticists, the people that study languages, people that are familiar with Siberian languages, connecting it to Alaska, and then now the evidence of bodies that were found, is different from what James Adair did. James Adair was comparing the customs, which is not. It wasn't as accurate as you see the customs here, especially with the rituals that they have, where they go around and drink whatever alcohol that is. What was the other genetic things? Let me just look this up real quick, because she doesn't mention these things, but yeah, this is way different than what James Adair did. You got the Epicanthic Fold, which is commonly is a monolith eyelid, is what it's called, which you can find amongst Native Americans. You can find amongst, let me see if it tells you actually. Yeah, high frequency populations. The highest frequency of occurrence of epicanthic fold is found in specific populations or ethnicities: East Asians, Southeast Asians, Central Asians, North Asians, Polynesians, Micronesians, Native Americans, and Mestizos. The Khoisan and the Malagasy among South Asians, they occur at very high frequencies among the Bhutanese. But you see how it says Native Americans, Micronesians, Polynesians, North Asians. So it's a connection in the epicanthic fold. That's one. Genetic connection, which is better than a cultural connection. But a cultural connection adding on top the genetic connection, it's way more substantial than what James Adair did. And James Adair is writing a book that we're reading now, instead of people showing us now that, look, we can make this connection. We see that Siberians do this and Native Americans do this. What James Adair was proposing, we don't know what he was looking at, He was saying that the Chickasaw Indians did this. Well, when we analyze what they do, what customs they do, they don't have, or their language especially, it's not connected to Hebrew, and their customs are not so connected to Hebrew Israelites. Black Hebrew Israelites believe that they believe that what is it called? A patrilineage, which means that you are who your father is, your father's seed or whatever. Native Americans don't even go by that. The majority of them I believe like almost all of them go by a matrilineage connection, which means that you are a Native American according to who your mother is. So there's a lot of things that don't match with what Black Hebrew Israelites say. And some of the claims of James Adair haven't been confirmed. You know, we can confirm all of this today, everything that's being said. But what James Adair was saying back then, how could we confirm what he saw in the 1700s? You know, we got to take his word for it. But here we go. The Epicanthic Fold is one. Then you have the shovel-shaped incisors. The teeth. I mean, come on, man. This is really a big connection here that deals with your cranial, your skull, your facial features. All of that tells a lot about who a person is. Shovel-shaped incisors are incisors whose lingual surfaces are scooped as a consequence of lingual marginal ridges, crown curvature, or basal tubercles, either alone or in combination. Shovel-shaped incisors are significantly common in Amerindians from North, Central, and South America. They are also common in East and Central Asians, Hungarians, the Inuit and Aleut people of Northeast Asia and North America, including but not limited to the Inuit peoples of Eastern Alaska, Arctic Canada. So we got the eyes, we got the teeth, we got a lot of stuff here, a lot of connections. Now let's go into the digestive system. Let me see. Alcohol flush, I think it's called. Alcohol flush reaction. All right. What is alcohol flush reaction? It's a condition in which a person develops flushes or blotches associated with erythema on the face, neck, shoulders, and in some cases, the entire body after consuming alcoholic beverages. The reaction is a result of an accumulation of acetaldehyde, a metabolic byproduct of catabolic metabolism of alcohol. So the way that Asians metabolize alcohol is similar to Native Americans also. That's another genetic connection. And it's caused by an aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 deficiency. This syndrome has been associated with lower than average rates of alcoholism, possibly due to its association with adverse effects after drinking alcohol. Because they always say Native Americans are alcoholics. Native Americans are this and that. And, the teepees, I see Diaz in the comments section. Yeah, the Siberians also use teepees and all of that. Let's see here. Heat flush is common in East Asians, with approximately 30 to 50% of Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans showing characteristics physiological response to drinking alcohol that includes flushing, nausea, headaches, and a fast heart rate. Damn, I thought it said that it. I thought I was going to connect it to the Native Americans, but let me see. I mean, I know they have problems digesting alcohol. Let me see. Well, I guess it doesn't. I could have sworn that used to be in there. Alcohol flush reaction. Could have sworn I seen where it says Native Americans. Let me see if I could find it somewhere. Yeah, I mean, the Native Americans do have trouble metabolizing alcohol, though, as do Asians. And we already made the connection between East Asians and Native Americans. But, you know, like I said, there is a lot of time in between those migrations. So they're not exactly, you know, the genetics are not exactly the same. But let's move on.
Bering Strait, there was a land bridge 30,000 years ago because during the Ice Age, much water was locked in glaciers and the levels of world's oceans were much lower. The 2015 research published by Science by Rasmus Nielsen and his colleagues contacted people whose heritage indicated they were of Native American descent. After analyzing their genome, they proved that about 23,000 years ago, a single group from Northeast Asia crossed the Bering Land Bridge. Then they eventually made their way to Alaska and the rest of America. In that same study, famous Russian geneticist Oleg Balanovsky analyzed DNA samples from the Russian biobank. As a result, scientists proved beyond doubt that Native Americans are closely related to the peoples of Altai. But during that study, another discovery was made. Besides Siberian ancestors, some Native Americans showed a puzzling relation to the indigenous people of Australia.
So that one what do you call it? That one 12 tribe sign, they threw in the Australians now. You know, they're trying to get more accurate more of an accurate connection, but Australians are Israelites? Like, come on, man.
Asia in the Pacific Ocean, located
Aboriginal
in the almost opposite part of the planet. All of this was possible only because of the genome studies which compare various DNA markers. So that's it. The assumptions of researchers and scientists are now proven, and we can say with confidence that Native Americans came to their lands from faraway Siberia.
Yeah, I mean, this is not even a debate among scholars. This is only a debate amongst religious people, you know. Let me see. This is another good one.
Native Americans are known to be a mixture of ancient North Eurasian and East Asian ancestry. So the question arises, how did this mixture come about and when did it take place? The study, Paleolithic to Bronze Age Siberians, revealed connections with first Americans and across Eurasia. In Cell, studies ancient DNA from the Lake Baikal region in Siberia, giving insight into this
In the live comments, George's Rua, we got to do a podcast on my Cult Watch channel. I'm down, man. I'm down. Hit me up on San Miguel TV.
In this study, they report 19 newly sequenced ancient hunter-gatherers from the Lake Baikal and its surrounding regions, spanning from the Upper Paleolithic to the Early Bronze Age. The Lake Baikal individuals occupied a space on a line running between Northeast Asia, ancestry represented by the Neolithic hunter-gatherer from the Devil's Gate in Russian Far East, and the ancient North Eurasian ancestry represented by the Upper Paleolithic Siberian individuals, Maltaboi, and Afansov-Gora individuals. The Upper Paleolithic genome from south of the Lake Baikal is placed close to the Mesolithic northeastern Siberian Kolmia individual and is shifted towards Native American. Early Neolithic individuals form a cluster that then in the late Neolithic to early Bronze Age are split in two distinct groups. The major shifted towards ancient North Eurasians as well as a closer to the Paelo-Eskimo Sakak individual. Another group is shifted towards Devil Gates, the East Asians, one individual being significantly displaced in the PC plot towards Western Eurasians, suggesting a potential integration of the steppe-related ancestry. One Upper Paleolithic individual from south of Lake Baikal is closely related with the northeastern Siberian Kolmia individual known from previous studies. Both these individuals are shown to have affinity with Native Americans and Beringian populations. So both could be modeled as a mixture between Northeast Asian lineages and a sister group of the Native American. This suggests that the source of the Native American ancestry was more broadly spread across Siberia during the Upper Paleolithic, as the individual from the Lake Baikal was found to be 4,000 years older and over 3,000 kilometers further south west from Kolmia. In fact, this basal Native American group experienced multiple genetic contacts with Northeast Asian populations, giving rise to distinct ancient Siberian population. Furthermore, they find that the complex transition between early Neolithic and Bronze Age populations in the Lake Baikal region. Baikal hunter-gatherers and Naganasan populations are more likely to have formed in central or southern Siberia, while Paleo-Eskimo ancestry could have emerged in either central or northeastern Siberia. They believe that Baikal populations could have been formed through an extended admixture process between local groups and Northeast Asian-related population. This admixture, however, did not continue substantially in the late Neolithic and Bronze Age. The genetic outlier individuals revealed the high mobility in the Bronze Age Siberia. And as a side note, among these genetic outlier individuals, they identify Yesterdia pestis infections, i.e.
And then dating this to the Bronze Age, a lot of the migration came during that time, which would be during the time when the Israelites were even starting to come about as a people during the Bronze Age. So the Native Americans were already populating America at that time.
These individuals had the plague.
This is a pretty in-depth, more scientific video. I've watched this guy's channel before. It's pretty good. It goes into a lot of the DNA, and he's a DNA guy. So we got to get into we got to get more familiar with this stuff. This is modern, evidence, modern science that they didn't have available back then. Let me see. Yeah, this guy has a good channel too. Let me see if I can. I don't want to post this whole video because it's getting late. But Finding America, or Ancient Americas, the Ancient Americas channel is a great channel. This guy's information is so vast. I believe he's Mexican. And he tells you what's known. He's not going to give you all this bullshit religious beliefs, He sticks to the evidence. He sticks to the science. He doesn't stick to these. He doesn't bring up anything that can't be verified. I'm not gonna go into everything, but I kind of want to show you a few things here.
Realization brought a puzzling question to everyone's mind that has since lingered to today. Where did the first Americans come from, and how long
Rick
have
Walls,
they
what's
been
good, my
here?
guy?
Now, this episode is meant to be an overview of the topic. It could be much longer and much more in-depth. Heck, you could make many episodes about this topic. That said, I've condensed this as best I could, and still failed spectacularly by making an almost 30-minute episode. Hooray. But before we can continue, there's an elephant in the room that we need to address, and that is how to refer to the indigenous peoples of the Americas as a whole. In my past videos, I've usually had the fortune of being able to refer to people of a specific culture, but in this video, I'm afforded no such leeway here. In an ideal world, there would be consensus among all indigenous peoples on how they should be referred to.
Let's skip.
Well, without further ado, let's proceed by discussing the previous theories about the settlement of the Americas. Throughout the centuries, and even today, lots of theories have floated around about the origins of Native Americans. One of the first people to give an explanation was a Jesuit missionary in Mexico, Jose de Acosta. De Acosta proposed that the indigenous people had migrated to America from Asia and that there was an unknown land route uniting both continents. For 16th century thinking, this was pretty good, and De Acosta was on the right track.
Yeah, De Acosta was pretty on point, man, and look him up because he was his view at the time was controversial compared to what everybody else believed.
Fortunately, De Acosta's ideas did not take off with the wider public, and instead, a popular theory that the first Americans were descended from the lost tribes of Israel took root.
See how this was the initial ignorant without much evidence. Their initial response was, oh well, maybe they're from the lost tribes of Israel. But if you look at Columbus and the people that came with Columbus, they thought that they were in the Indies. Why do you think? Why do y'all think that it's called the West Indies? Right? You got Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, all the islands of the West Indies, because they thought that they were in the Indies. What's the Indies? Where's the East Indies at? it's Indonesia. That's Asia. They thought that they were in Asia. And then later on, you had these hypotheses that we think that the Native Americans are the lost tribes of Israel. We read scripture in 2nd Ezra chapter 13. We're going to go into that too.
These were the tribes that were deported from Israel after the Assyrian conquest. This might sound pretty far-fetched today, but this theory was all the rage for a time, and it got lots of high-profile endorsement from men like William Penn, Cotton Mather, and Joseph Smith. Using this theory as a basis, many naturalists concluded that humans must have arrived in America around 3000 BCE. When you think about it, that's insanely recent.
They were way
But
off.
such a view couldn't last forever, and as archaeology began to develop in America, a new picture
3000 BC. How could they be the lost tribes of Israel? I mean, I guess it's possible, but if that's fairly recent, how recent is 720 BC? If Israelites were the ones that populated America, and from 720 BC to the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, they populated all of North, South, and Central America in all that little space of time from 720 BC. That's crazy. That's why the time constantly is being pushed back further and further. Even now, they don't believe that in the Clovis first theory. They think that there was possibly another migration before the Clovis people. This is even pushing the date further back. And these people are called Proto-Indians, Paleo-Indians. They don't look like how Native Americans look today. I mean, of course, they're the ancestors, but they had a different look. We're going back 20,000 years almost. Come on.
began to emerge. The turning point came in 1908 when George McJunkin, a former slave-turned-cowboy and self-educated geologist, discovered the skeleton of a bison antiquus in a washed-out gully outside of Folsom, New Mexico. Bison antiquus was a larger version of the modern bison, dating back to the Pleistocene. They were already well known in the scientific community, but what made this discovery so sensational was that McJunkin found a spear point in the remains, meaning that the bison had been killed by a human. This and similar discoveries that followed changed everything. This was irrefutable proof that humans had coexisted in America with the creatures of the Ice Age. As time went on, more and more sites were discovered with ancient tools and spear points, and archaeologists began to see patterns in these different tools. Different prehistoric cultures all over the world have distinct styles of tools, and this can help identify different cultures at various periods.
Yeah, so this was a big find here by a former slave. Man, this is amazing right here. And then the evidence just kept piling on.
Most tools being found in North America during that time were Folsom points, which are characterized by their small size, subtle tails, and fluted heads. These types of tools are unique to North America, and they're not found anywhere else in the world. However, it wasn't long before an older type of tool was discovered at the site of Clovis, New Mexico, the Clovis point. Clovis points were larger with a slightly different design. Scientists and archaeologists eventually determined that they were the oldest type of points in the Americas. Another thing that they noticed was that all Clovis sites dated to a very small window, from about 13,500 to 12,900 years BP. Like their Folsom counterparts, Clovis points are a uniquely American invention. They're not found anywhere else in the world. Just an FYI, BP means before present, and it's the dating convention that's used in these contexts when you're talking about really old dates. If you want to convert a date from BP to BCE, just subtract 2,000 years and you'll get the rough BCE date.
Oh, so there you go. That's a correction from what I said earlier. So BP and BCE have 2,000 years apart.
With these dates in hand, a consensus emerged that the earliest people arrived in America no earlier than 13,500 years BP. Later named the Clovis First Theory, this theory was first championed by C. Vance Haynes in the 1960s.
And write that name down. There's an archaeologist. There's some evidence. Here's an expert who actually has a lot of history of studying these Clovis points.
He based his theory not just on the archaeological record, but also on an important geological event, the last glacial maximum, or LGM as it's abbreviated. During the last glacial maximum, the Earth was cooler and more water was locked up in the ice caps. These glaciers stretched across North America, coast to coast, cutting off the interior of the Americas.
And this is why, since this was cut off, this is why some of them not only believe that there was a land migration, but that they were coming down from the Bering Sea down this coast, what they call the Vancouver Bay down here, and they kept coming down because this could be a better way to travel, so you don't have to walk, and you just go down along the coast, and you can still see the land and make your way down. And some of them, it's believed that there was a very quick migration even further south into South America, and passing North America, where a group went down there and migrated down in South America. The history is, we still trying to figure everything out exactly how it happened, but we do have a good understanding of where they came from. What we're trying to figure out is when, how, and how prevalent is their genetics now. And I mean, we can see that it's very prevalent. Like the DNA evidence is some of the best evidence out here. It's better than somebody making a claim in a book, pretty much.
Contact with Eurasia. At the time, Eurasia and the Americas were actually connected via a land bridge known as Beringia. This region was ice-free at the time and fully capable of supporting humans. What Haynes really focused on was the timing of the glacial retreat, which began about 15,000 years BP. You'll notice that that's not much farther back than the earliest Clovis remains. Haynes' theory was that humans had entered Beringia during the last glacial maximum, but were halted from further migration by the glaciers. The LGM kept North and South America a virgin landscape, free of any human impact. All that changed when the Earth began to warm back up and the glaciers began to retreat. Eventually, a lane would have opened up in the ice sheets, allowing people to migrate from Beringia into the unpopulated interiors of the continent to settle the vast landscape. These areas would have been dominated by mammoths, mastodons, armored rhinos, camelids, horses, and giant sloths.
So all these animals, there's also a migration not only of humans, but of animals from one side from one continent to the next, from Siberia to America.
Name a few. Other supporters of this theory would later point out that these megafauna vanished from the archaeological record at the same time that Clovis tools do. Thus, they theorized, Paleo-Indians arrived in the Americas, Clovis tools in tow, and overhunted the American megafauna until they were extinct.
Right, so this animal is now currently extinct, but there are other animals, like the gray wolf is another animal that is indigenous to these two parts. So there's a migration of animals and people.
Haynes' theory was a hit. It quickly gained mainstream acceptance, and it's easy to see why. It matched up with a known archaeological record very nicely. It was almost too good to be true. For anyone that went to school in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, this is probably what your textbooks taught you. If only I was making this video 40 years ago, we could roll the credits and get back to our lives. But it was not to last. By the 1980s, that consensus was beginning to come under new pressure as people began to look at a wider array of evidence. Linguists were puzzled by the enormous diversity of languages in the New World. Some had concluded that this could have only happened if humans were in the Americas for much longer than 13,000 years. More importantly, genetic studies began to shed new light on the history of human populations and their movements. Scientists began to challenge the notion that there was one great migration into America after the last glacial maximum. Their research began to paint a picture of multiple migrations that began long before Clovis culture. Climate researchers began to look at climate data and argue that the extinction of the megafauna was not the result of overhunting, but rather the result of climate change and habitat loss. They also pointed out that when the corridors first opened through the ice sheets, that newly exposed land would have been uninhabitable by humans or animals for centuries, and thus not traversable at that supposed 13,500 BP date. Even within the archaeological field, new archaeological sites with human evidence that predated the Clovis culture were being discovered. These discoveries within the archaeological field itself caused a huge stir, and things got heated pretty fast. Such pre-Clovis dates were criticized heavily and explained away as the result of contamination, poor dating techniques, and general incompetence, until the writing was finally on the wall. People really hate to see a good theory go. So where does that leave us? Well, in a bit of a mess, I'm afraid. The picture of human migration into America is far from settled, and competing evidence paints very different pictures. Let's look at the archaeology first. As I mentioned before, several sites predating the Clovis first theory began to emerge. One of the most important is the Monteverde site in the far south of Chile. In the 1970s, archaeologist Thomas Dillehay began excavating an ancient Paleo-Indian campsite and found man-made materials that dated back to between 18,500 and 14,500 BP. Now consider the location. This is not a site anywhere near the point of entry into the New World. This is near the end of the line, down in South America. The people living there were not Johnny-come-latelys. They had been in the Americas for centuries by this point, and they were well adapted to the environment. Though very controversial at first, these excavations eventually gained wide acceptance and today are almost universally accepted as proof that there were people in the Americas before the Clovis culture. And actually, further excavations at the site have also yielded material dating back to over 30,000 years ago. But these conclusions are very disputed, and even Dillehay has acknowledged that more study is needed. So take that with a big grain of salt. Other sites, such as Paisley Caves in Oregon, the Page Ladson site in Florida, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, and Buttermilk Creek in Texas, all show pre-Clovis human settlement. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter has remains that have been dated to 16,000 years ago, long before Clovis, albeit not without some controversy. Paisley Cave is also important because it has human remains that date all the way back from 13,000 to 14,000 years BP. And by remains, I don't mean bones, but coprolites, which is the scientific term for fossilized poop. And now you know, and now you'll thank me come trivia night. These coprolites can also be analyzed for human DNA and compared with modern indigenous populations, which is very important in helping reconstruct the genetic history of humans in the Americas. But more on that later. Now, if you really want to go down the archaeological rabbit hole and ruffle some feathers at the archaeology table, you can bring up the sites of Bluefish Caves in Yukon and other sites in the Americas that go way back. Some of these even predate the last glacial maximum and thus are highly controversial. Bluefish Caves, the best known, have megafauna bones with signs of butchering dating back to 24,000 years BP.
So this is another piece of evidence here that is still, it is accepted, but it's a little controversial because what they found, like he just said, are bones with markings on it. So, but it looks like it did come from humans.
Just this year, Chiquihita Cave in Mexico made headlines over the summer when it was announced that stone tools were discovered in layers dating back to over 30,000 years ago. This discovery received about as much criticism as you'd expect. Now, I'm not an archaeologist, so I'm not going to take a firm stance about the quality of these claims, but consider that if just one of these dates is correct, it would radically shift the dating of American settlement. Even if one of these sites is true, it means that some group of people did get into the Americas. Whether or not these early settlers survived or died out is another debate entirely. Another interesting and recent discovery is a pre-Clovis tool tradition in the Buttermilk Creek area in Texas. Although we have plenty of compelling evidence from human existence in the Americas before the Clovis period, pre-Clovis points can be a bit hard to find, so this is an important discovery. Clovis points are distinct for their fluted designs, but these have a stemmed design instead. Currently, there's debate if these represent a precursor to Clovis, a contemporary, or even a competitor, but they've been dated to between 13,500 and 15,500 years BP. Some archaeologists have tried to draw comparisons with them and stemmed point traditions in Asia, but these are not embraced by most archaeologists. It'd be neat if it was true, but we don't know. With all that archaeology to chew on, let's move on to our next type of evidence, genetics. Nothing has revolutionized the study of American migration more than the field of genetics.
So all this evidence is just piling on. We already covered the genetics. We already know that. I wanted to go through the archaeology, the real archaeology that debunks the pseudo-archeology, that's proposed by Black Hebrew Israelites and Mormons and a bunch of other people, not just Black Hebrew Israelites and Mormons. Like they were listing people along with Joseph Smith and other European settlers. I mean, some people, people believe things based on their own reasoning, and they might not understand that. You got to be objective. You got to look at the evidence, the objective evidence, and how do you rule all of this archaeology, the genetics? How do you rule this out when there's so much that piles on, and just accept? Well, I read a book by James Adair, and he thinks. You're going by what somebody thinks. Or I read a book by Lee Eldridge Huddleston, and the book that was written by Lee Eldridge Huddleston, he didn't. He was going by what European concepts, pretty much. He didn't live amongst like Native Americans and none. He just wrote the book and put together a bunch of, things that some of these settlers, from Spanish to European, for what they were saying about the Native Americans, that some did believe that they were from the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That we know that was a popular belief. Let's go into the, we've done this a million times, but I never get tired of destroying these pseudo breakdowns, man. Let's go. Well, let me see. Been looking for an IUIC video about Second Ezra chapter 13. Second Ezra is explained.
Forth into a further country.
No, that's not it. There was another one. Let me see. Arsereth. Damn, man, there was a video that I found not too long ago. And I believe it was IUIC. Let's go into this pseudo crap right here. I already disliked it. Oh, this is
In the time of Hoshea the king.
What?
Whom Shalmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters.
Well, they're not going to break it down. They're just reading the scripture. I could do that. I want them to actually break it down. Let me see here. ICPK does it. That's a long video. Damn, I saw one where they were out in the street. Let me see if we can just get to it by ICPK.
Who are the two kings? You had, that's right, I see Jeroboam.
Okay, let's see if we can read it.
You go to Deuteronomy again. It says,
I want to go to Second Ezra. Let's see if we can catch them breaking it down incorrectly. Second Ezra 13, right?
land. You see how he was removed from that land. Keep reading that.
And they entered into Euphrates.
The Euphrates.
The
What?
Euphrates
Uh-huh.
The Euphrates.
by the narrow passage of
Places.
the river.
By the narrow places of the river, right? So let me show you something. Let me show you a map real quick. Right? It says, and they entered into the Euphrates. So we're in Assyria. Right? There's a couple images of the Assyrian Empire. Right? A lot of them, a lot of the records show the Assyrians as being tall and mighty and things like that because they were prideful in their mind. And
All right. The map right here, you see how it has Iraq, Nineveh. This is the capital of Assyria. Pretty much was in Nineveh. The Israelites were placed somewhere up here, somewhere higher up, where the Euphrates. You see, this is the Euphrates comes around and goes up here. They were like over here. So to cross the Euphrates, they would have to go west. just it's some archaeology, geology. They're saying that they came down into the Persian Gulf, into the Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. This is not what the scripture says, but you're gonna see what they do with the
They had the
scripture.
children of Israel paying tribute to them. You get what I'm saying? So,
Let's see.
verse 43.
Okay. Second Ezra, chapter 13, verse 43.
Uh-huh.
And they entered into the Euphrates.
What?
Euphrates.
Jesus
Euphrates.
Christ.
Euphrates. No problem. I didn't want you to get it though. You're doing an absolutely amazing job.
No, he's not.
Go
The
ahead.
Euphrates
Uh-huh.
by the narrow passages of the river.
Right?
For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood
Uh-huh.
till they were passed over.
Right.
So the flood is the river, the stream of the river that's coming was stopped. Why? So they can pass over and get to the other side of the river Euphrates. Check what he says.
What? What does that mean? This means that the Most High, you got to understand that the our brothers, right, of the 10 tribes, were going on a voyage that was unheard of. You understand? It took time to prepare to go on that voyage.
And how did they go on the voyage? Also, what were the vessels then? Because a common vessel is called kafur, I believe, or kufar. My bad. Kufar or kafar. What is that? Is a type of coracle or round boat traditionally used on the Tigris and Euphrates River in ancient modern Mesopotamia. Its circular shape means that it does not sail well against the current, as it tends to spin, but makes it safe, sturdy, and easy to construct. A kufar is propelled by rowing or poling. So this is something like this, pretty much. Something similar to this image. We got images here. You see these things? And this is 1932. Imagine back in damn 720 BC, man. Like, what do you think they were using to get across the river? You think they had some large vessels that can carry 10 tribes? Come on, man. But he's saying, oh, well, there was magic done. Well, yeah, I mean, that's how they describe, or that's how they can get away with everything. Well, how did it happen? It was magic. But let's go back to his video.
It took time. It took planning. And when it said the Most High held still, meaning the Most High made a way for us to be successful in our voyage, because the Lord wanted this to be so. So we had the 10 tribes, your Reubenites, your Manassites, etc., your Issacharites, go into that Euphrates, come down to the Persian Gulf, that led to the Indian Ocean. We're traveling.
All of this. He's putting in all of this stuff that's not in the description.
Of Africa, across the Atlantic, into the Americas.
How did he know that they went towards the Atlantic? Why couldn't they go towards the Pacific? I never understood that. Because then that would be conclusive with what the evidence shows, that they came down the Pacific, or they came from the west, down the Pacific, down to Mesoamerica and South America, through the land. But they hit that coast. They definitely inhabited America, the Native Americans, from that side, mainly.
Southern America, North America, Central America. You see, the Americas, right? Keep reading address.
Colonel Khan. Verse 45. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half.
Uh-huh.
He's not even,
And the same,
he doesn't even break it down. Through, it says through that country. So They like to say, I remember this Rob Yawasop cat from Sakari. I debated him on this topic. And he was saying that, well, the river goes through the country. It goes through different countries, is what it goes through. The scripture says through that country. But they're saying, well, the river goes through the country. But hold on, once you get to the Persian Gulf, what country does that go through? And then you get to the Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, what country does that go through? The Atlantic Ocean doesn't go through a country. The scripture says they went through a country. So how could they be on boats and make it for a year and a half? Once you get out of the river, you're not going through a country anymore. It took a whole year and a half. Did it take a year and a half for them to go through the country and get out of the river? What about the rest of the voyage that you guys are saying? You see this garbage here? This is crap.
Right? Keep reading address.
Verse 45. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half.
Uh-huh.
And
the Lord, not the Zab. The Lord, because it said the Most High showed signs for them. See? And held still the flood till they were passed over. Right?
And that's another question. What did they pass over? When you read the scriptures, it talks about passing over one body of water. Every time you read scriptures, it talks about them passing over. When you read pass over, they passed over Jordan. They passed over the Red Sea. That's one body of water. You're talking about a river, sea, and oceans. They passed over what? What did they pass over? The Euphrates is what they passed over.
Verse 45.
Let me read from the top.
Yeah.
Verse 45. For through that country there was a great way to go.
Uh-huh.
Namely, of a year and a half.
Like there were a such thing as boats. You understand what I'm saying? There was people knew about, hey, there's a land about a year and a half from here. You get what I'm saying? There's a land over there.
It doesn't take a year and a half to sail from that part of the world to America, by the way. It might take 6 months. If you just to give them something, I'll give you 6 months, but damn, a year and a half. It took like 3 months or 2 months, 52 days, I think it is, for Columbus to get from Spain to the Caribbean. And now you have to add a little bit more, of course, because Spain is closer, but goddamn, a year and a half? How the hell did they survive? So many people. You had only a crew of people that came, that would come and travel on boats. But you're talking about 10 families, 10 tribes. That's a lot of people. When you have also the elderly, children and all of that have to try to survive on this. And then where are the ships or whatever the hell they use to get to America? Where's the evidence of that?
But not everybody was willing to make that trip as a nation and relocate. And you know what I'm saying? But we found out about that during our time in the land of Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, being captives. And we saw them getting weaker and weaker. And we decided, it says, we took counsel amongst ourselves that we would leave the Assyrians and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. You know what I mean? Right? And in verse 45 it says, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. You understand? And it says,
and he's not even explaining that. It says through. He doesn't even realize that they're going through a country, which is typically on land if you're going through a country.
Region is called Arsareth. That's the Americas, meaning an unknown land. You understand? Or a newfound land, Arsareth. You see? Read verse 46.
Okay. Verse 46. Then dwelt they there until the latter time.
Right. And this is, let me explain something to you. Right? Then dwelt they there until the latter time. Didn't we just read in Genesis 49?
Yeah, so I mean, I thought he was going to say to that country, because that's what they like to do. Instead of saying through that country, they say, he did say it actually. I think I missed it. He said it took 1.5 years for them to get there. For them to get there. To get there? No, they went through a country. They didn't go to a country. But like, what's his name? Gorilla Hebrew changed that word. He said, well, why? I asked him, why does it say through a country? And I got that on video. You could check my channel. Gorilla Hebrew came at me and said, well, that's because it's supposed to say to that country. So he's changing what the Bible says. But I was trying to see if I could find the other video that I saw, man. Second, is it this one, Oklahoma? I think it is this one, IUIC. Let me see. Nah, this cat. That's not who I wanted. But yeah, he doesn't talk about it either. But damn, where is that dude? Give me a second here. I'll find it. You see all these videos? This is all pseudo-archeology here. Gathering 10 tribes. Yeah, let me see if I can find this real quick. Yeah, I'm gonna just send it to my computer, and cause I got the video on my phone. Let me see here. Give me 1 second. Yeah, here it is. They do this all the time. They change the words of the Bible so it could fit with what they're saying. Let me see.
Multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt.
So now, those 10 tribes went to a further country where never mankind dwelt. Because, yes, never mankind dwelt. So they went to a different country. So I want you to understand that. They was around the heathen. They went to captivity. They was granted permission to go back home. But they were like, no, we're going to a different country where nobody's at. Read.
That they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they enter into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river.
The reason why it says the narrow passages of the river, that means that it's easier to get across from one side of the river to the next. Why would you have a bunch of ships, big ships or whatever the hell you think it is, and get to narrow passages? Wouldn't you want to go to where it's wider, where you could fit, people can enter in, and why? The reason why it's saying narrow is because it's easier to get across. It's trying to make people think in their mind like, yeah, this is a crazy thing that they crossed the river, but it's like, well, it was narrow though, so it makes it easier to believe. But they can always throw in, well, it's the Most High, and He used magic like in the Red Sea and the River Jordan.
Signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over.
So they went to the Euphrates, and the Most High showed a sign that He held still the flood, because you're going to need big ships, right?
Big
so
ships?
They held still the flood, then they went down.
Where does it even, it doesn't even say that.
From the Euphrates, they went down.
They went down? Where did it say that?
Did you read how long it's going to take them?
For through that country there was a great way to go, namely 1.5 years.
1.5 years it took them to get to...
2. He changed through to 2.
It took them to get to this, to get to...
1.5 years. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely 1.5 years.
1.5 years it took them to get to this side of the world. So
wow, that's you see how they do that? They changed the word through to that country, because if you're going through a country, one country, and the country was Arsareth, and listen, I don't believe in that This is supposedly an angel that was telling. How the hell did the angel, or how the hell did anybody know? Think about that. How did anybody know how long it took to get to America? That these people left Israel. Where's that in the Bible? When you go to Second Kings 17:6, it tells you that the Israelites were placed in Haram and they were placed in Syria. They got off any boats or ships that they were taken on by the Assyrians. They got to a land and they were captive. Now you're saying they broke off from captivity. They left. They took the ships now. Now you're adding things that are not even in the scriptures. Second Kings chapter 17 verse 6 doesn't even tell you anything about Israelites coming to another land or that they left. Doesn't tell you any of that. You guys are going into Pseudoarcheology, the Apocrypha, which talks about an angel coming to Ezra, telling him that the angel knows that these Israelites, they actually went through this country, which is Arsareth, that's never before inhabited. And that's another thing. How do they have all this information? Never before inhabited. And these people like to think, well, everything was inhabited during that. Not everything was inhabited during that time. And either way, we don't know how do they know this information is true? You're just going off of this and trying to fit this into your belief. It doesn't fit. We went through all the archaeology. You're talking about Mexicans being genetically connected to these African Americans, West Indians, and Haitians. Look at these people and compare them to Mexicans. The DNA doesn't match. The archaeology is against these guys, and the genetics is definitely against these guys. But, this is what people that believe in pseudo-archeology and all this pseudo stuff, this is what they get into, man. This religious beliefs now. You have to make things fit and create crazy voyages from the Euphrates River to America. That's insane now. And all we're talking about is a migration from a small piece of land from Alaska, from Russia, or from Siberia, or Russia to Alaska. That little piece of land, that's like not even 5 miles, I believe. And that migration is impossible, but this crazy ass voyage is possible. I just wanted to show you that. I was looking for that video, but I'm going to close it out because it's getting late. I think I pretty much went through everything that I wanted to go through. I mean, there's a lot more with the archaeology, the real archaeology that was found, not the pseudo-archeology that Hebrew Israelites like to use, like the damn Los Lunas and all of that. We got actual real archaeology that connects the Native Americans to Northeast Asians. And it's a fact. But, we're going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep attacking these guys. I'm trying to do another debate with somebody that's going to be honest and actually listen to the science, instead of just brushing it off as if it's insignificant. But, we'll go into that. This has been San Miguel TV. I appreciate y'all for coming through. Have a good night. Peace.